You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 22nd of October 2025 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's program.
You have Israelis and Americans working hand in hand to try to begin the plan to rebuild Gaza, to implement long-term peace.
US Vice President JD Vance is in the Middle East, hoping to keep a fragile ceasefire on track and look at the long-term solutions as well. We'll have the latest. After that, Hermès appoints a new creative director, seating one more in the never-ending musical chairs of fashion houses. And Art Basel goes to Paris just after Freeze came to London. Monocle's Sophie Monaghan-Coombs is in the French capital for us. Sophie, what have you seen so far?
Well, Chris, I am standing on one of the balconies overlooking the beautiful Grand Palais. The galleries here have brought some amazing works to their booths, but there are also lots of exhibition shows and other things taking place around the city.
More from you shortly. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. Happy Wednesday, everyone. Good to have our listeners along. We're going to start in the Middle East because the ceasefire in Gaza is, well, over a week old, and today it is getting American reinforcements in the name of US Vice President JD Vance, dispatched by Donald Trump to make sure the president's promise of having solved Middle East peace holds for at least another few weeks, maybe even becomes permanent. Alexis Self is Monocle's foreign editor and joins me now for his take on that. Lex, good to have you.
Good afternoon, Chris. Good to be here.
How are we feeling about this? JD Vance is saying he sounds optimistic ahead of a meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu. Should he be?
Well, I think we're back in the Trump reality TV diplomacy where everyone's saying different things to the camera that they're saying to other people. And
do we need like the background as well?
Yeah. We need to be like, Benjamin sees JD and, promises one thing and then, says to the Knesset another thing. I think despite the kind of dizzying speed with which events move at the moment, I think, Vance's optimism can derive from the fact that he's the deputy to the US president that has achieved,
a ceasefire.
Something. Exactly, something. And if it holds and eventually leads to the reconstruction of Gaza and, after that, potential, era-defining things, then I think he has a lot of reason to feel optimistic. I think this is Trump's greatest, not just diplomatic achievement, but achievement full stop. But what we're seeing and what you're saying is people saying different things to different people, and I think part of the strength of Trump's diplomacy is his ability to sort of force things through without quibbling about the detail. But are we going to see the detail bite back?
That is exactly the question, isn't it? Because as much as we can trumpet Middle East peace and a ceasefire, there has been a ceasefire before. In this case, yes, very different because Hamas has also returned the hostages to Israel. So that was a big step. But nonetheless, the devil is in the details. And now come the details. That's part of maybe what JD Vance is there for. One interesting aspect of this, I wanted to get your take, Lex, because you've also written about this a little before, about how Hamas was kind of celebrating as if this deal was, a good thing for them. They have not committed to disarm, and even JD Vance has basically now said, well, there's no specific deadline for them to disarm. But I mean, how long does the US think it can really hold Israel at bay if Hamas does not disarm? Won't this be a bone of contention for this meeting with Netanyahu?
Yeah, and fighting did break back out on Sunday, which led to Jared Kushner being dispatched to Israel on Sunday to find out what had happened there. I think the Hamas/Palestinian line was that the it was a cell or a group of fighters that weren't following orders from Hamas, which has promised to, agree to the ceasefire or observe the ceasefire. How long can the US hold Israel at bay? Well, I mean, they haven't. They've already responded to that with. But I take your point. How
There's
long? There's
already been some initial interruptions.
I don't think very long. I don't think very long. And I think that responsibility for moving this towards phase 2 is on those countries in the region, the Gulf states, Turkey, Egypt, to come up with something concrete in terms of security and reconstruction that means that we can move forward to phase 2 before things descend back into, hellish fighting.
Well, and that's an interesting point if you bring in the other players in the region as well, because JD Vance is obviously there right now. And I think what's interesting is if you asked the other regional leaders, at least when this deal happened last week, one of their arguments was they wanted the Trump administration to stay engaged. So this, if you want to take a positive from JD Vance being there, it is the fact that he's there. He's still engaged. The Trump administration is engaged. But then the question is, what do they want from the U.S.? What does the U.S. need to do at this point that the regional leaders maybe can't do on their own?
I think the US wants to act as a bridge between, I think Israel's actions over the past 2 years have ostracized it, from lots of the world, but especially its neighboring countries and especially their populations. I think, the very difficult thing. And I think the reason that countries like Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf countries and Turkey are showing initiative, or at least, a kind of interest to be involved in the reconstruction of Gaza is because their populations are so, appalled and restive by the state of the Strip. And so, yeah, I think... I think the US will stay interested, and yeah, as I said, if events didn't move so quickly as they do these days, this would still be the number one story everywhere. The fact that it isn't shows the kind of world that we live in. But if this optimism can be continued, then I think it bodes very well for the Middle East and for all these countries that are saying that they will be involved and get involved. But, in terms of like bilateral agreement and, this is kind of unprecedented in that part of the world. So, whether or not, you wouldn't bet on it happening quickly or, necessarily going to plan. But optimists will.
Optimism will prevail.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens, Lex, but just quickly before we let you go, what else are you working on at the moment here at Monocle? It's production week next week. I understand you also met with the Mexican ambassador yesterday.
Yeah, I joined the Mexican ambassador on her commute from Belgravia, Josefa Gonzalez Blanco. She's a lot of fun, actually. We walked from her residence in Belgravia to the embassy in Mayfair, just off Hanover Square, walking through Hyde Park. The plan initially had been to bring some carrots in her handbag to feed the horses in Hyde Park, but apparently the authorities in Hyde Park have banned the feeding of horses and all other animals, which is sensible. Apparently it was getting out of hand. But
even for an ambassador, that's quite sad, really. Alexis Self, Monocle's foreign editor, thanks very much for joining us. And now here's Carlotta Rebello with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. Overnight Russian drone and missile strikes on Ukraine have killed 6 people and left another 21 wounded, forcing power outages nationwide. The attack came just hours after a planned summit in Budapest between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin was put on hold after Moscow rejected a ceasefire. Rail operator Eurostar has announced it plans to run double-decker trains through the Channel Tunnel for the first time. The €2 billion deal includes an order of up to 50 trains from manufacturer Alstom to increase the size of its fleet by nearly a third. Eurostar expects to start using the first trains in 2031, and each service would have about 1,080 seats. And the Louvre Museum in Paris has reopened its doors to visitors 3 days after thieves stole the French crown jewels in a heist worth around €88 million. Police are still hunting the 4 robbers, and the Apollo Gallery, where the theft took place, remains closed to the public. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Carlotta. And now for some fashion news. This week it's been announced that the French luxury label Hermès picked a new artistic director for their menswear collection, the 35-year-old Londoner Grace Wales Bonner. Monocle Radio's Fernando Augusto Pacheco caught up with our fashion director Natalie Theodosi. There have been positive reactions to the news so far, but Fernando began by asking Natalie for her first impressions.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I was really excited, and I thought I had no more energy in me to talk about designer switch-ups. We've been talking about them quite a lot together on this show, and I think there have been at least 15 in the last year between the different houses, but I think this one is particularly significant for many different reasons. To start with, Hermès is not a brand that changes creative directors quickly, like many of its competitors. Véronique Nichanian stepped down after 37 years. It was a retirement. It wasn't because they want to change direction. They need to push someone out, bring someone in to increase sales, which is what has been going on in the rest of the industry. But also the choice of designer, Grace Wales Bonner. She's young, she's an independent designer, she's been doing incredibly well on her own. But I think she will be able to do magic with the resources of Hermès.
And it was quite beautiful. Apparently, she gave an interview to a magazine a few years ago saying that it was her dream to work for Hermès. So in some ways, it was kind of a perfect match in that sense.
I remember being backstage at one of her shows, and I was impressed because she was actually the guest designer at Pitti in Florence and did this beautiful show. But, you know, the set was scrappy. It was a smaller scale event. But she said that she's growing in confidence and she wants to dream big and build a brand that can be part of an LVMH, that can compete with these big luxury houses and to also represent Black culture. So to me, that kind of came back in my mind, and it's great to see her now have this global stage and be able to represent everything that she has been representing, but to a much bigger audience.
Well, and culturally, as you said, I think she's the first Black woman actually to lead design in a major European house, and one of the few women today as well.
It's incredible, isn't it? I mean, there's been an ongoing, very important discourse about the lack of female creative directors, and what's interesting that now we've seen the debuts by many of the newly appointed designers. You know, everyone is in their 40s, everyone is a white male, so you actually start to see some parallels and know that everyone's drawing from the same pool of references, because it's not their fault. They've had more similar experiences in some ways. So she will bring a much needed, refreshing perspective, a different one. And I think it's not because what we've seen so far is there's anything wrong with it. I just think diversity and a mix of perspectives is always welcome, and it always makes for a more enriching fashion industry.
So yes, especially with her age, I think Hermès is playing the long game. But let's talk about, from what we know about her designs, everybody's saying that's quite cerebral as well, and apparently she's very shy as well. Again, even with that, it kind of works with Hermès, which doesn't come across as a showy brand or show-offy brand, right?
Absolutely, and I think they really protect their designers. You don't have to be a very public person giving interviews, posing with celebrities, hosting events. Your job is really to focus on the craft and the clothes. So I think that it's a role that suits her. And yes, it's an interesting dynamic because Grace is quite shy from her very first collection. She's soft-spoken. She's a true intellectual, a little bit more introverted. But she's managed to build a really successful business on her own, which is really rare in London. And I think it's important, you know, not everyone that succeeds in this industry needs to be a loud extrovert. There should be place for everyone. And the fact that she has gotten a big job by being who she is hopefully encouraging to more people who want to get their foot through the door.
And finally, Natalie, I just want to ask about Hermès in general. Of course, the world of luxury, there's ups and downs. As a brand, is it kind of doing quite well recently?
Incredibly well. Like you said, there have been a lot of ups and downs, a lot of brands changing their strategies. And interestingly, when they do change their strategies, usually they raise the prices, they rethink distribution, and their kind of North Star is always Hermès. Everyone has been wanting to rebrand and re-strategize in many ways to become an Hermès equivalent, to reach that level of luxury. But Hermès has been doing it for decades, and they're still at the top of their game, which is why even when the rest of the brands are seeing sales slow down, they have been growing. They are opening new factories, investing in craft, and just cutting out the noise and doing their own thing. They are not raising prices like crazy. They are opening some new stores, which is interesting, but their offer is quite focused. They're empowering their designers, and I think quality is unparalleled. So it's a big winner in a very tumultuous fashion industry.
That was Monocle's fashion editor Natalie Theodosi in conversation with Fernando Augusto Pacheco. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. This is The Briefing and I'm Chris Chermak. If the art world's centre was London last week, it has now moved to Paris as the world's gallerists move from Frieze in the British capital to Art Basel in the French one. Yes, don't get confused by the name. Art Basel is very much happening in Paris at the moment, and here to tell us all about it is Monocle's Associate Editor for Culture, Sophie Monaghan-Coombs. Sophie, you've been at both. You've been in London, you're now in Paris. Organisers, I'd read one story, we're trying to give this a sort of Barbenheimer vibe back to the Barbie Oppenheimer Hollywood days. Is it living up to that billing? Are you seeing that sort of vibe?
Well, Chris, I think everyone is very keen to make a competition out of things, as they often do. And as you say, Frieze is kind of pitched against Paris. But I think they're both very important for the European art market and the global art market in general. And, you know, each different, one is Frieze, one is Art Basel. They're very different fairs. They're in very different locations, and they're, you know, flavoured by the cities that they are in. And of course, it's not just about what happens on the fair floor. There's also lots of satellite events. There's other kind of smaller fairs. There's lots of free programs, and then there's exhibition shows as well. So all of that coming together. You know, I was at Frieze, as you say, and now I'm here in Paris, and they're both very busy. I think there's kind of space for both of them in the art world.
If there is space, just before we get to some of the stuff you've already been seeing, I mean, beyond location, that is an obvious difference. Paris now, London before, but give us just a flavour of some of the other differences. How do these compare or differ between each other?
Well, you obviously have a slightly different mix of galleries. The best known blue chip galleries will be at both. You know, it is very expensive to take part in fairs, so a lot of galleries are choosing one or the other. I've spoken to a few London-based fairs, and they have decided not to come to Paris this year just because costs are rising and can be difficult to manage at the moment. So I think you'll obviously see different booths, but then also the works are slightly different as well. London has this reputation for being slightly edgy, and I think mostly lives up to it. But you know, I've seen a couple of interesting works here as well. But as I say, I think most of the kind of art world and the serious collectors will come to both, and it's a benefit that they happen a week after each other, because if you're coming from the US, if you're coming from Asia, you can wrap them all together, just make one trip to Europe.
Okay, so Paris trying to be, is slightly more serious, but also trying to be edgy. Tell us about what you've seen so far. What has caught your eye?
Well, I've been on the fair floor this morning, just having a wander around. The first work that I really wanted to kind of spotlight, which has already been sold, sadly, is a beautiful work by the American painter Laura Owens. It's at the Matthew Marks stand, and it's huge, and it's one of the first things you see when you walk in, and I think it's really eye-catching. And then the other thing I wanted to flag, I actually had a piece that I edited for the Expo, the kind of photo essay at the Monocle magazine, and the issue that is coming out tomorrow spotlights 7 painters who are still working in their 80s and 90s, and they're really at the top of their game. And so I've really enjoyed going around the fair and kind of spotting lots of their work here. So the American painter Peter Saul, who paints these kind of wild, technicolor, quite satirical, political works, as well as the Austrian painter Martin Jungwirth, who paints on cardboard and with beautiful pinks and reds, and a couple of others as well. So I've really enjoyed spotting those as I've been wandering about.
Always nice to see a magazine story sort of come to life. Listeners, do check out Monocle's magazine for that as well. But there's also another event I understand you've been to, Sophie. I'm not sure what to make of this. Qatar Airways and Swiss Beats?
Yes, I have just run to this interview coming from that event, so it's still taking place. But Qatar Airways are the premier partner of Art Basel here, and obviously all eyes are on Doha because they have recently announced the first Art Basel in Qatar, which will happen next year, and then Swiss Beats, as well as his music making life as a rapper and producer, is also a big supporter of visual art and a collector, and they've come together and chosen 100 creatives that they are going to be supporting. It's called the Creative 100, so I just heard from a couple of those. They have some of them here speaking in person. A Spencer, who is amazing, has an incredible look and vibe to him, as well as a fashion designer, the music producer Black Coffee. There's a whole bunch of different people. So yeah, it was a very interesting event that was a little bit unlikely, but I think it sounds like they're doing some very interesting work, and they've picked a really interesting group of creatives to support.
Well, I'm not sure what could top Swiss Beats. Maybe it's talking to us here on The Briefing, Sophie, but I do understand that you also have other plans for this afternoon. Where are you going from here?
Yes, so I've got a couple of interviews here with some of the kind of key people from Art Basel, and then this afternoon I really want to try and get around some of the museum shows that are taking place at the moment. So for this afternoon I've bookmarked the Musée d'Orsay, where there is an exhibition from the British painter Bridget Riley, which has just opened. She is also coincidentally in her 90s, and so I'm really excited to head to that this afternoon.
So just to clarify then, once again, kind of like London was as well, this is something that's happening in one venue, but then there's so many others. There's museums. The whole of the city is kind of taking part in some way, shape or form.
Yes, exactly. As well as the exhibition shows. There's a big Richter at the Louis Vuitton Foundation, which I will head to at some point. There's also satellite fairs like Paris International, which I always go to. But one of the other things, we've got some of our design team from Monocle here as well, because there are lots of design events, and Design Miami, Paris, is also taking place. So I went there yesterday when I first got in and saw some of the amazing collectible designs. So yeah, there's lots happening. It's impossible to see all of it, but I will give it a go.
And finally, speaking of all the different events happening, what's happening this evening? We're sort of getting involved as well, because of course we want to be involved too.
Yes, last night we had our Monocle party, which was at the cafe on Rue Bachemont, and it was wonderful. Lots of people from the art design world came, and it felt very buzzy. There are obviously lots of events, but it was nice that lots of people came to stop at us as well. And then this evening, I'm going to go to a dinner curated and put on by We Are Honor, which is an organisation that is kind of does sort of culinary pop-ups around art events. So they're always Art Basel, and I've wanted to go for a very long time. This evening's event is Detroit themed, which comes from the Detroit Salon, which is something at Art Basel this year, which is basically they've created an imaginary collector's living room and filled it with artworks from Detroit. And this is ahead of Biennale, which Detroit is planning on running in a few years' time. So there's some kind of warm-up activities, and it's all about giving Detroit a creative voice, which isn't just about music, and showing off a visual art scene as well.
Sophie Monaghan-Coombs will let you get back to enjoying all of those events through the day and the evening. Thank you for joining us. That's all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Anita Riota, our researcher was Joanna Moser, and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Chermak. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.